All right, we're going to go ahead and start session 3 of our discussion on how to better teach adults. This session is titled Bridging the Gap. So, John,
thank you, Bernie. All right, well, in our last session, we were just talking about making certain that we, from a geographical perspective and a theological one, come to appreciate this land, because I do think there is an important theme in Scripture that we need to make sure our students connect to in regard to this major theme. Also, let me mention this, that it's been really exciting for me over the years to get to teach a course in Bible geography, and then to see when students take other classes and they're reading there, they go, oh, I know where that is. Oh, that's a real, they make that connection. And so instead of they're reading something about, the battles that took place at Mizpah, Ramah, and the Benjamite Plateau, and, all these kings going here and there. And you can kind of get lost when you don't even, it's like, man, there's a bunch of places they're mentioning, but now it means something to them. And it can mean a whole lot more to us too, if we'll take that time to kind of plot them out as we're going through and we're studying. So just from that standpoint, it's important, but also again, seeing this important thing of this being a testing ground of faith. Does anybody remember what the first major point, not this, but going back, we said that God put them in a land, not just a land of plenty, back here, but what was it about the land where they are? What was the first? This testing ground of faith is a testing ground of faith, number one, because of what?
It was a land bridge. It was vulnerable.
It's land bridge vulnerable, right? Its position, geopolitical position is a land bridge, small, a land between. Trust me, don't form coalitions, he says. Then he puts them in an area where there's agricultural opportunity, but, okay, that's the land where you're going, but it's a land that drinks the water. A land that drinks the water. A land that is dependent upon God. So as we continue to read down through Deuteronomy, again, they're about to take the land. Here's what you do. Here's what you don't do. Here are the blessings that can be enjoyed. So he says, if you indeed obey my commandments, then I'll give you, now notice, the rain for your land in its season. The early rain, notice that reference, the early rain and the latter rain, that you may gather in your wine and your oil. Then he says, take care lest your heart be deceived and you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them, then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will, very important phrase, shut up the heavens so that there will be no rain. All right, now, just in looking at that, does that ring a bell with anybody with regard to a Bible event?
Oh, maybe
Elijah.
Yeah, Elijah and the prophets of Baal, right? That's sort of the well-known example of that, how that they began to worship Baal, and we'll talk about him in just a moment. But yeah, so looking at these two things, I'm going to give you the rain in its season. It's not like the Nile that you could set your clock by. Okay, we know we're going to get a flood. We know, good water down here. We can trap the water and we can use it throughout the year. That's not the way it is in the Bible lands. Israel is in a unique position, not only in terms of its place geopolitically, but also in terms of its climate. Notice, the further south you go, the less rain there is. The further north you go to a more tropical environment. Now, in the higher regions, you're going to get more rain. The little phrase that I use with students is this: higher is wetter, lower is drier, south is drier, north is wetter. So anytime you're looking at the terrain of an area, you know that the rain can be varied. It can be varied. So it is a land and a terrain of variety that is on this, and here's the operative word, that is on this transitional zone. It's a semi-arid climate. a transitional zone. For the north, more tropical, south, more arid. So here we are in this transitional zone with certain growing seasons with potential for year-round agriculture, but also the potential for drought and harsh winds from the desert. So no rain, your crops fail. The wind just blisters and, dries things up. We were there in June, this past June, and they had not rained, had rain in a good long while. And that wind was coming, and man, it was hot. Oh, it was like a heater. And we've experienced that. We grew up in Texas. We know, we live here very long. We understand what that's like. So what does God say? He says, trust me, and I will send you the rain in the early year and in the latter year, 2 rainy seasons. The problem is, 1 Kings 18, they were tempted to serve Baal. What do we know about Baal? Does anybody remember something about Baal?
He was the weather god.
Okay, yeah. In some of the early texts that they found, these cuneiform style tablets up in Ugarit, they found a number of these texts that talk to us about religious practices, cultural beliefs, that sort of thing. And in some of those texts, he is called the rain god. He's called the rider of the clouds. He's called the storm god. And some of the depictions of Baal in these inscriptions show him holding in his hand a scepter, like a king or a god would. And many archaeologists and historians, others have interpreted that, scholars have, as a lightning bolt, because he kind of feathers out, like a lightning bolt would, you see. And so he holds the key to the storms. Well, Baal is particularly worshipped in the north. Now he gets down here in the south as well at times, during the divided kingdom, but right here in Samaria, right there, we know that Jezebel and Ahab embraced this worship. And our agricultural society, they need the rain. Jezebel's worshiping Baal as well as Ahab and the people of Israel. And Elijah says, well, let's just have a duel right here on Mount Carmel. Well, why go to Mount Carmel? Well, it's a higher elevation, a little more lush up there. It's like sort of like Baal said, okay, Elijah saying, we're going to make this challenge on your own home turf here. You're going to get the best chance of rain up there. So let's see if you can do it. And remember, they build the 2 altars and they bring water. Now, by the way, a little side note here, I've heard criticism of this. The Bible says they've been in a drought for these almost 3 years, and then they're getting a bunch of water. Where are they getting the water? Right? You ever had that question? Throughout the Bible lands, there are cisterns underground. We're going to talk more about this in just a moment. They would dig out, so in some cases, like at Masada, they're as big as this room and higher. Some of them are the 4th the size of this room. And they would store water in there. So water could be stored for quite a while to use, to keep at least your family alive. And you may have some for a while that you can feed your livestock off of or give them water. But so there was water available. But as far as the crops and all that, they're failing. And so it was a major ordeal. And so to go up here on Mount Carmel for this duel is significant. And then just to make sure that they knew that there was no trickery involved here, we're going to pour water over the sacrifice, right? And he calls upon God, he comes down and consumes it. So it took a lot of faith, is what I'm saying. The bottom line is it took faith. You're in an area that drinks the water, runs off of these hills, and it soaks into the ground. And either runs off, soaks into the ground, or runs off into the Mediterranean, or goes down into the Dead Sea, or in the Jordan River Valley. So you got to capture it, but you can't capture it all. So you need that rain to happen the twice of the year or the 2 seasons every time. Because if it doesn't, you're going to be in trouble. And so it took a lot of faith. Well, imagine an Israelite saying, the Canaanites seem to be doing pretty well up here. Maybe I'll hedge my bet just a bit. And we'll pay homage to the storm god. We'll still worship Yahweh, but the storm god, yeah, we'll sacrifice to him. So they were compromising. They were assimilating into the culture. And God had said, don't do that. Trust me, I will send you the rain. It takes a lot of faith, doesn't it, to walk through this life, to do things the way God said to do them and for the reason God said to do them. But everybody else is doing it this way. Well, what does God say? We've got to trust him. He knows what's best. He always knows what's best. Well, that leads us to a little discussion here about, okay, well, what can we learn from the hydrological practices of the ancient world? Because the Bible uses water to convey important messages. Albeit, we've already talked about water. Baptism. The waters of the flood cleanse the earth. Waters at the temple, they used to also for cleansing purposes. Makes sense that God is going to use the water in baptism for us when we connect. Oh, okay, water is an important element, but I do it by faith, and there's a cleansing that takes place there. But okay, God, I can get the connection. All right. Well, are there any other ways that God uses water to teach lessons? And he does. And I want us to, first of all, understand something about accessing the water. How do those people get access to water, and why is that important? Well, the first way that they would have been able to get their water is through wells and springs. Now, this is really interesting because as it rains, you've got the runoff, right? That's the surface water, and then you've got groundwater. And rain soaks, or water does, down into these layers of limestone. Limestone is like a sponge. It's permeable. It soaks it up. And sometimes it hits an impermeable layer and it moves laterally. It comes out in the form of springs. Or sometimes it begins to soak down and it becomes so heavy, these rocks do, like a sponge. The pressure is so great that it begins to push up in these little fissures here and come out in the form of a spring. Those instances where it comes out in the form of a spring is known as living water. Okay. Or if we could go down into our well here, and then water comes in from the sides of these rocks, right? Because they're filled with water. They're like sponges. They soak it up. And water empties into this. It's been, in their mind, filtrated. It's clean. But primarily, these wells that are being dug and reaching that water are these springs, like this one at Jerusalem, known as the Gihon Spring, or this one up north at Dan, is obviously moving. It's alive. So that's number one, is to remember that God uses this in reference to living water. All right. What other ways of getting your water? Well, you could go down to the rivers and the lakes, the surface water that runs down into there. But then notice this last one. Now, this is really interesting to me. This last one is you store it. You capture the surface water and you put it in cisterns. Now, when I was a kid, my granddad was a farmer, and they had some cisterns, but they were above ground cisterns. They were like metal tanks, and they had a lid over them. And the storage idea of the cistern is accurate with regard to the Bible lands, but in most cases, it's beneath the ground. Now, here's a cistern that happens to be broken. What they would do is they would dig down and into the ground itself, into this limestone. So you got these layers of limestone, particularly in the Judean Hill Country, and you dig down into there, and you got a place for water to be held. But what was the problem with digging into limestone? What did I say a while ago? It's porous, right? It soaks it up. So what do you think they did to keep it from being soaked up?
Lined with clay.
They lined it with clay or plaster. So they had the ability to line the insides of these things with plaster. And you can walk in numerous ones today and see them. I'll give you, here's a small one down there that's right in that limestone. You can see this smaller one here where the sides of it, you know, have been lined with planet limestone. And then look at this one. This is a really good one at Masada. So this has been dug down into the rock, but notice if you went up close, you can tell how smooth it is. You can tell that they've lined that, you know, put it inside with plaster. And then here is a illustration from the late 1800s of what's under the Temple Mount. Huge cisterns under there, which makes sense, right? Because of all the washing that has to be done at the temple during the, especially the Herodian period. And so you can't get under there today, at least, you know, Christians can't. And, but this early explorer, he had an artist with him and they drew these, you know, pictures of these underground cisterns. So there's cisterns all over the world. I mean, all over Israel. Now let me go back here. When you line it with plaster, what can happen is the earth can shift at times. And when it shifts, it breaks the plaster. So let's keep that in mind. So we got living water, we got water in storage containers that are lined with plaster. And then we get this. God comes to his people who have forsaken him for so long and says, my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they have hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. I mean, if you were living in Israel at the time and you thought, okay, I'm really thirsty and I got a choice between these two things here. Which water are you going to drink out of, right? Yeah. I want the fresh water that's, you know, coming out of the rocks that's been filtrated by God's natural filtration system. And it's pure, it's clean, it's cool. Not this stuff that's been sitting in this, you know, for a while. I'd much rather have that. God, I mean, they understood that. When God said, look at what you guys have done. Basically, you said, I don't want this. I want this. And not only that, but you decided that you're going to rely upon yourselves and dig out your own cistern. Not that it was wrong for them to dig cistern. I'm just saying, he's saying this spiritually, what they've done. They decided to create their own salvation. And then they've lined it with something that ultimately cracks and can hold no water. It drifts, you know, it sifts out. So there's no sustenance there in the long run. And God is saying, when you give yourselves over to idolatry, you are creating for yourself your own salvation, and I'm telling you, it's not going to sustain you, and you're going to lose your life. So very, very vivid. And notice, again, the references was John 4. By the way, let's go back to that. Remember what happened in John 4? What was the story?
And he would have given you living water. So
Yeah. So what happens, we come here, let's go back to our well picture. So we dig a well, and Jesus stops at Samaria and talks to this woman, and give me a drink. And she said, you're a Jew speaking to me? And he goes, woman, if you knew who it was that was talking to you, you would have asked of him, and he would have given you living water. What was her response?
Where's this water?
you don't have anything to draw it with.
Yeah, you don't have anything to draw with. And then she makes this comment. Are you better than our father Jacob, who gave us this well? You're not going to get any better than getting down to the fresh living water. You can't, how are you going to improve upon the engineering technique of a fresh spring? You can't do it. How are you going to improve on that? Well, just like so many of the people in John's gospel, they're on a physical level, and God's talking about a spiritual level, much higher level. And he says, the water I'm speaking about is the Spirit of God, right? Dwelling in you, that will be like a well springing up in you unto eternal life, of which you'll drink of, you'll never thirst again. You drink out of these, here, you drink out of that, you drink out of these cisterns, you drink whatever your water source is, you're going to thirst again. Come to God. and drink from the waters of Shiloah, you're going to be satisfied and filled. That's what to me is pretty awesome. If we can get our students and we can get our friends to realize how fulfilling this is, how fulfilling God is, and how that it's so rich and experience and living life for Him and the joy that comes in that life. Okay. All right. So God's testing ground of faith is concerned about many things: the geographical position, the climate, and the available resources that exist for them, where they have to learn dependency in their languages. All right. Okay, let's just take about a 2-minute break if you don't mind. I'll be right back, and then we'll pick up on this third lesson. So if y'all stretch your legs and make sure you get a handle, I'll be right back.
The next handout should be the bridging the gap. I think I gave one to everyone. If you don't have it, raise your hand. It's the one with 2 pictures on the front.
That's the card, the one we use.
Yes, okay. All right.
Oh, so the women's I see is not.
It's not there.
I told you, she was always right. Maybe there's some other house they sell or be raised. So I think I got the land one. All right. So that was really about bringing those two together, thoughts about God and geography, and see that play out throughout Scripture. Pay attention to that. Now, let's talk about then in this session about bridging the gap. What are some tools? What are some resources? How do we do it? How do we break this into the, bring this into the classroom where it's not, again, just about, oh, that's interesting, but it's relevant, it stays with them. All right, well, we talked about the fact that the Bible story is rooted in a historic and geographical setting, a real time and a real place. And what we need to try to get people to understand is that that is in fact the case. By the way, we can't take anything for granted. We were talking about this, before the break about maybe some of us when we were growing up didn't connect it. Not long ago, I was out at Midland and I was teaching a class to a group of middle school students at a Christian school there. And pretty good sized school. And so it was just a, kind of special guest speaker kind of situation. And there were probably 30 middle school students in that class. It was a large class. And I gave them a presentation basically because they'd asked me to on the ministry of Jesus, but from a pictorial standpoint. In other words, tell me the story of Jesus while we walked where he walked, and we looked at the pictures and went along, all that. So the teacher had them write an impression paper after they were done and send it to me. So what did you learn? What did you think about it? And it was, of course, I read with great delight. These young people had taken the time to read and thank me for coming and all that. But one of the things that struck me was a greater percentage of the kids in that class essentially said this: we had no idea the Bible stories were real. We just thought it was a book of basically, here's how you live and what you need to do. And so they were fascinated by the fact that this is a real place, real time. So that taught me that we've, taken a lot for granted. Do y'all remember, of course, everybody knows Rush Limbaugh, right? His brother, I think was a preacher of some type. And I remember Rush Limbaugh talking about that he one time went with his brother, and this was the first and only time he had went to Israel on a trip. Now, Rush, if you knew Rush, he thought the Bible was a good book, and, I don't know that, what his views were about Christianity and all that, but I know that he certainly felt like it was a book that should be trusted. I remember him talking to me, I was so amazed. Well, there's a Jerusalem, and then there are these rivers, and it's there, and he was going on and on about it. He just couldn't believe it. And here's a guy that reads a lot, is around a lot of people and all that, but he himself was amazed about the accuracy and the information that's found in Scripture. So let's don't take this for granted. Let's make this story come alive. Make the Bible 3D. Help them to see all the things about it. So let's move beyond just this to doing some things that I think are going to help them. Number one, let's create a classroom environment which helps bring the Bible to life. Now, at the lower grades, look at that. That's pretty exciting. If you're a little kid coming into something like that, and now I don't want to be critical, and I'm not, and I meant to mention this today in my lesson in the gymnasium about how that a loving heart and a sincere attitude can really compensate for maybe a lack of teaching strategies and skills. But when I was a kid, we had an older gentleman that taught mine and I had one other friend. It was a small church. There were just two of us that would come on Wednesday nights for this middle school class. And they had a high school and everything, but we were the only two middle school kids. And this older gentleman set up, you'd walk down this hallway, first of all, this old building, and it was sort of like a spook house in a way. It was dark, no windows, it's an old building. And then you open the door and the room is tiny. And guess what? They put the old communion table in there for a desk. And then they had 3 or 4 pews left over that were as hard as, the Masada rock I showed y'all are. And they got 3 rows of those in there. And that's all you can barely get in there. There's no place for a desk, nothing. You're sitting on that thing. Okay? Now, again, I learned a lot from him. I'm not trying to in any way negate what he did, because I admire him and love him, and I'm thankful for what he taught me. But then we'd go to school the next day, and this is kind of what we saw. We saw a classroom that was alive, and we saw teachers that had spent time, putting things on their walls for teaching purposes and to make things real and to drive it home. We need to do a better job. I think as a church, we need to step it up. And now that's not an error. I know there's a lot of teachers that do this. That's awesome. But what about our adult classrooms? Okay. And I'm telling you, I'm trying to do this at Bear Valley and move us along a little bit. And they kind of make fun of me sometimes because I have maps and, and topographical stuff in there, whatever. And it's still not what I want it to be. I'd like to have a classroom that looks something like that without the little desk, of course. But, this lady that I saw, I couldn't believe it. It was so neat what she had done. And I think this is just a basic history class at a public school. But then this is a Bible teacher, and I don't know what from religious group, but I thought, this is really cool. First of all, they have a huge map. Yeah. And she talks about, whenever they go to the map, and they always show where they are and what they're talking about, and maybe if it's history or something, church history, and they point it out, so a huge map. And then these are all pictures from a place that's called the Nazareth Village. Did you go to the Nazareth Village when you were there?
I did.
Yeah. And so it's a recreation of what life was like during the time of Christ, and there's some evidence that where they are is actually a village from that time period. They found an old threshing floor and some other farming kinds of areas. And so she took pictures from there and enlarged them and then put them on the wall so that she could go occasionally and talk about maybe the woman, how she weaved, and Jesus talks a lot about daily life and pulls upon those things for parables and for metaphors and things. Things from culture to show who were the Philistines, what were they like? Have they really found anything about the Philistines? And then she had a timeline. This timeline that was every bit as long as from here to there, and periods of history, and she could go up there and, again, some of these adults classes, I think we could stand it. I love timelines. I have to tell you a story. One of my favorite things to do is to do a human timeline. We go to the Dead Sea, where the scrolls were discovered. I have people stand up with a number of the date, that the year, and then they kind of have this big long line so we can see where the Dead Sea Scrolls and fit and all that. Well, anyway, I like to do that in class when I'm teaching, is to say, okay, here's the creation, and then we come down here to here's the time of Abraham, and then here's David, and then here's the United Kingdom, and then right here, okay, we're right here, the divided kingdom period. And so when his Chronicles written, it's down here. He's talking about stuff going on down there, right? So to kind of help them to see on the timeline. Well, I thought I explained that the first day of class, and it was about 2 weeks or 3 weeks into it, and I said, okay, where am I? Right here, where am I? And they're all looking around, and they said, so, well, you're standing in front of your, desk. And I said, no, I'm standing where Chronicles was written. And they go, what? And I said, haven't y'all been paying attention to my timeline? They go, no, we just thought you were energetic, moving up and down, back and forth. Right? So be sure you clearly explain what you're trying to do when you're moving around. But timelines, helping people to see where it fits in. Make these classrooms come on. I like what she does. She has a station here. Where they can log on to the computer and use Google Earth and zero in on things, and there's exercises. It's almost like she's got stations. She does have stations, so that she has the class lesson, and then people break up into stations, and they move the kids around, and they interact, and it's just a great classroom environment. Okay, so I think that's number one. We need to put some maps on the walls. We need pictures. We need to bring artifacts in and make this place look like that, this is real. All right, number two, tools for teacher research, student learning, and classroom environment. Well, what are some personal tools that I would recommend that you can buy? This is a really good one. The Zondervan Atlas of the Bible. There is an exhaustive one, and then there's one that's called Essential. Be sure you get the exhaustive one. It's not all that more exhaustive, but it's really good. I like what Rasmussen does to first talk about the different areas of the Bible land, the different geographic zones, and getting you a feel for some of the things that we've been talking about today. And then he breaks into the different periods of history and traces the story of the Bible chronologically, in that way. But here's one that, remember I said you can't go to heaven unless you have that one. This was one that we used when I was in school, and I still have our students buy it. And you can go to Biblical Backgrounds Incorporated. I think it's on the handout that I've given you. And it's not very big, but it does some of the best maps I've seen of the Bible lands are in these two things here, the Geobasics and Regions on the Run. And these guys lived there for a while. Bob Monson and Steve Lancaster, not the Steve Lancaster that, is the singer, but what's his name, Steve Lancaster? Keith, yeah, okay. I was a band director in Dripping Springs known as Steve Lancaster, and I always got those mixed up. Yeah, so no, Keith is the singer. Yeah. But just pass this around. I mean, you start looking at the features. Go ahead and take it and pass it around. You start looking at the features, and then the whole inside of the thing I've ripped out, and I just brought the cover. But some great materials for people to interact with, and for us to have special classes on. I really recommend maybe sometime for our ladies' Bible class or a men's Bible study to go to that source, and they've got this one's called the Regional Study Guide, and you've got 7 of these maps that fold out about this size, and he goes story by story and says, okay, mark here, do this. And what you're doing is, it's not just a matter of, an exercise of futility. Okay, I marked it. He's taking you through the story so that you're learning the story, you're learning the faith lessons associated with it, and you're learning more about, of course, where they all transpired and took place. So their materials are really good. They're constantly working on them. And so good sources to study, okay? There are others. This one just came out. Paul Wright was the president of Jerusalem University College for a number of years. He just retired from there, but he just produced, this just came out, and it's really good. The other thing I like about this one, as well as the rest we should take, is lots of pictures, lots of photographs of the Bible. And so you can use that in your classes as you're going along and saying, okay, here's this site, here's this place. You don't have the slide of it, and I'll show you a place in a moment to get that, but use those books hands-on. I think tactile stuff, especially for our younger middle school, high school students, and adults as well, for them to be able to handle it and look at it is very important. The Logos Bible software has a series of maps, and they even do a then and now kind of thing. What does it look like, now? What does it look like then? The ESV Concise Bible Atlas is very good. This is a standard one, Macmillan. Okay, and then here's one done by a member of the church, the Waldrons, and the Guardian of Truth publication. It's been around quite a while. And just so you'll have one there from church. Here's another thing. Some of you like to sort of tinker and make your own maps. And I mean, make them, put cities in there or rivers or identify them or whatever. This is a great source. And all you got to do is a one-time fee of like $15 or something. And then you can make your own maps. These are the ones we use in the Bible and Passages videos because you get the rights to them easily. They don't care. It's a little clunky, a little older in terms of its technology, but it's really neat. So let's just say you want to take this basic map and zero in on Israel, but you don't want the word Jericho to be there. You can take the word Jericho off. You can take the word Sodom off, and you want to put in Nazareth and draw an arrow. You can do all kinds of things with that to custom make your own maps as you're talking about particular periods of history. All right. I really strongly suggest that we use more photographs when we're teaching. I tried to do this when I was preaching full time, but even in a sermon I'll just take a sermon of a text, and maybe the lesson wasn't really anything about necessarily geography or some connection to the land, whatever, but I would, if it was talking about a place, I'd at least put that up as I'm talking about it. And so that people in the congregation and visitors can make that connection. Oh, wow, this is, and sometimes I would use it as the backdrop for my slide. So let me just mention this and put a plug in for this because we don't make any money off of it. It's just, and you always have sales on this. It retails for $99, but a lot of times you can get it for $49. Just wait till it goes on sale. But I'm mentioning this for a lot of reasons. One is it has over 1,000, and I've labeled these photos and tell you where they are, what direction. But it not only gives you a variety of setting or of places to draw from, but let's say, and then once you buy them, once you get them, you have the rights to basically use them in any way that you want. You just can't resell it. You want to make a canvas, buy that. You can, just beautiful high resolution photos. Really good. We took a great photographer with us, and some of them are such high resolution, you can enlarge them and put them on the back, that back wall up there and almost cover the whole thing. But let's say you got a gospel meeting. You're advertising some seminar event, and maybe the theme is the sunset of our life. I don't know, the sunset of our life. Well, we got pictures of sunsets from the Bible lands, and you can put that into your advertising and your flyers and use them that way. So, man, a great tool for you to use in the classroom, sermon preparation, your own personal edification, church bulletins. We're writing an article about the woman of Samaria. You go in there and see if you can find a picture on that. And again, sometimes it's hard to find those because you don't always have the rights to those. But with these, you buy them and you can have them. And we're working on the next 1,000 now. I've got about 800 titles on I just need to push through to get those others, haven't done it yet, so that we can get those others. So it'll be another little over 2,000 by the time you get that done. And we'll just add it to it and it won't cost any more really. Then there's this place that I highly recommend, and Todd Boland has been doing it a lot longer than I have, and it's called BiblePlaces.com. His are a little more expensive, but for years I used his and still do occasionally. Some of the photos you saw here today are his. You can get a library of 5,000 plus 5,000 photos, and you know, they're divided up according to regions, and it's not just Israel, it's several places. But he also provides PowerPoint presentations with them. And in the PowerPoint, there are notes down in that section. So, man, a great resource. I encourage the elders to buy that for their students, or I mean, for their teachers, or put it in the teacher workroom, and just to have access to that. So he does a really good job, and he's a really nice guy. Okay. Then another source that, of course, I don't know if some of you know about this, but if you don't, I want to tell you about it. We put together these documentaries about the Bible lands. We've got 15 longer ones, about 30 minutes long. And then we're doing a new series that's called Connections, Exploring Faith and Fact, and they're shorter. You know, people like shorter stuff. But so we've got 7 of those. Why does it keep doing that? You know, we've got 7 of those out, and essentially then we've got our website, Bible Land Passages, and there's information about those areas, including what we're working on now is getting up some of the models. We've got a guy working with us now that is creating these digital models so that you can manipulate and utilize in various ways, and we're pretty excited about it. Do we get the sound working in this at all?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Maybe in the break we could find out about that, and because I was going to give you a little preview of this, but so we got a video that basically describes what we were talking about a moment ago from Ephesians 2:11 through 15, and the circumstances surrounding that and the discovery of that balustrade inscription and so forth. Okay, and best thing about all those videos is they're free. That's what we want them to be, is available for people to watch. You can, they're on Amazon Prime. I think I've got a little slide about that. Let me see if we can get these. I thought I did. Okay. So you can go to Amazon Prime. You can go to BibleLandPassages.org and all the materials there. Vimeo, not Vimeo. Vimeo, is that what it's called? And then, if any of y'all familiar with Faith Life TV with Logos, it's a Bible software company, and they do a tremendous amount of work in developing this. It's a well-known Bible software package, but they have a series of like daily devotions. So one of them is called Faith Life TV. And we have a channel on there, and you can see some of our videos on Faith Life TV. And trying to think what else, where those are.
Are you saying Faith Live?
Faith Life, sorry, Faith
Life.
Life, Faith Life TV. Now, let me tell you a story. We were talking about this earlier, and so just to let you know about the fact that these documentaries and these things you can show in your classroom are not just documentaries to say, okay, that's interesting, but they're designed to build faith in people and to teach them a faith lesson. So at the end of almost all of them, especially the longer ones, we have faith lessons that hopefully will help people in their lives as Christians. But recently we were out at Capernaum there on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. We had a group out there, and I noticed, I look up over there, and we were doing some filming for our next project, and I look over and our camera guy was doing this to me. He said, come over here. So I walk over there, and there's a guy standing there, and he said, I want you to meet this guy who knows who you are. And The guy says, I've seen all the Bible and Passages videos. And when I saw your guy filming and I noticed the lanyard he was wearing and the name tag that had his information on it about Bible and Passages, I started looking around and said, oh man, started talking to him. I came over there. Turns out this guy is an American who is a Baptist missionary in France. And he has been showing them all to his Baptist church there in France. And he stands up there and interprets them. And, well, he said, I just got to tell you how much we appreciate, what you are doing. And then he said, I want to tell you this also, how it helped me and my family personally. I never would have dreamed that this part of the video was going to help somebody. He had watched the one called Kirbet Caiaphas and the story of the biblical Sha'arayim. And one of the things we discussed in that film is a discovery made up there at Kirbet Caiaphas on this ostracon that has an allusion to something in the book of Leviticus about caring for the strangers and the widows. And so there's some discussion about that on that video. Well, he said, my wife and I were watching that, and I got to tell you, we've been through a real tough time in our life because our daughter decided she was going to run off with a Muslim boy. And so basically we just kind of decided we were going to cut her off. And said, I didn't really know how to approach it. I thought, I can't let her think that this is okay and all that. And he said, well, we watched that video and we saw that little thing in there about God saying, be kind to the strangers. And he said, it made us really think, maybe we're not approaching this the right way with what then came to be their son. And so they started, decided they were going to do nice things for him and reach out to him. And it changed the dynamic of that relationship, and he's really hoping that he can convert him to Christ. Well, he was just so excited about meeting us and then seeing the video. Later on, he sent me a video of where he told the story of meeting us at Capernaum. He's telling the Baptist church there that they're meeting all this. My point about all that is this: you never know where that's going to end up. And it's also a way that maybe is a little less offensive as a way to kind of get people interested in the church, and okay, it's the Bible and stuff. It's not that Church of Christ stuff. It's just, however they may view it. And so it's an opportunity, I think, as an evangelism tool. Okay, what time are we supposed to end?
45.
Okay, so just a couple more minutes. Okay. So, and then we come back. I may just let you see.